Hello and welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jen.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome back to Note Doctors, a music theory and pedagogy podcast. So if you have been looking for some conversation on how to get video game music in your classroom, oh man, we've got a great episode for you with this one. We are talking with Dr. Brent Ferguson, who has a great resource on the Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy on ways of incorporating video game music into theory curriculum. There's so much goodness in this episode. You're going to really enjoy it. Before we go into the episode, though, let's learn more about Dr. Ferguson.
Brent Ferguson, or Dr. B.A. Ferguson, is a lecturer in games, sound, and music at Brunel University London. Brent was drawn to music through video games with influences from composers such as Miki Higashino, Yoko Kanno, and Michiru Yamane. They primarily study ludomusicology and pedagogy, and have published several or co-written articles, chapters, and resources on these subjects. They compose for both concert hall and video games, and Brent performs a wide variety of music from appearances in rock and roll tribute bands to their work as a classical guitarist.
The mass amounts of appropriation of signaling certain cultures with a mode or signaling certain things with a certain type of scale or timbre that you're going for, and then seeing the name of it in the silent film score as or some really offensive cue in some ways. You see, but you still see these things today, and you still see it in video games pop up as well. And so also having students, I guess, see that and be aware of that. And that's another one of those appropriation versus appreciation deals. How far is that line? How thick is it? How thin is it? Are they appreciating the music by doing this? Are they appreciating the culture by doing this? And that usually brings up some interesting conversations.
Brent, we are so happy to have you on the podcast to talk about your work with video game music and implementing that into the theory curriculum. So we're thrilled to talk with you about this because I think that's something that our students are so into, obviously, if not our own the faculty are playing video games too. So it's something that I think a lot of people are interested in, and a genre that, as we continue to go into the future, will be a genre that we study and analyze and think more about as we go along. But before we get into kind of your work that we found in the Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy, maybe give us a little bit of a background about how you got to be where you're at, and did you really believe your love of video games would really help yourself in this career that much?
Thank you. Really, thank you for having me. I mean, games is what got me into music. So my first game that really made me stop while I was playing was Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo, soundtrack by Yasunori Mitsuda, and it's just gorgeous. It was in the forest. I think it's called The Secret of the Forest, and I just sat there for what seemed like an hour just taking it in. I'm like 9 or 10, and it's just amazing. A little bit later, I played a game called Suikoden with a soundtrack by Miki Higashino, and she just wrote absolutely gorgeous music for the first 2 installments of that series, and that one made me want to figure out what was going on in the music. That I wanted to learn how to do that, and I was starting to learn a little guitar. I have a lot of musical influence from parents and family, a lot of flamenco and Mexican roots, and then a lot of popular music, rock, 90s R&B, things like that. Just a very mixture of music. So I ended up going to University of Texas at San Antonio for my bachelor's degree. I started out as a classical guitarist. I couldn't really hang, I guess you could say. It was a thing, but I switched to composition mainly because I wanted to do theory, but they don't offer theory as undergraduate there. So I really had a teacher, James Ballantyne, who turned me on to theory and just did all these jazz examples right in the middle of class, would have us jam out, do improv just out of nowhere. And it was just awesome. I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to do that. So composition got me into it. Um, I went for my master's at Texas State University and did theory and studied film music for the most part. And then I applied to PhD programs. I didn't get into any. So I taught for 4 years in Austin as a classical guitarist under the Austin Classical Guitar Society. And I had a great time doing that. And I decided to give it another try, though, because I still really love doing theory and still really wanted to do that. So I got into a few places, and KU was the one I picked. So I ended up going to KU, wanting to do game music, but was told that I couldn't really write the dissertation on that. So I ended up doing music videos and film, the movie music videos, so music videos, marketing film. But as soon as I got done, I started one co-writing, which is something that I believe is really healthy, especially for me. I only know so much on my own. I started co-writing and I started writing about video game music. So getting into ludomusicology, and that's been wonderful. I think that helped get me where I'm at, especially today. And I didn't think I was going to get a job coming out of the PhD in theory, just like, a lot of people have that scare coming out of it. I was working in financial aid at KU at the time. So I started learning video game development and sound design programs, which have free tutorials, by the way. So Unity was what I use. Unity's been in some weird hot water, but a lot of the other ones like Unreal and Godot also have free tutorials and a really great community. But for audio people, for music people, the two programs really to know are FMOD and WWISE, or it's WISE, but it's spelled WWISE, and those are audio implementation programs, kind of a middleware. And I got into that really hard during that time, and was trying to make a shift, but I got a job at the College of Southern Maryland, a community college here in La Plata, Maryland, and I taught there for 2 years, and I saw the application for Brunel, and now I'm headed to London. So I'll be lecturer of game sound and music there, teaching, music theory, but also implementation of sound effects, and just career building, essentially. I think that answered your question. I hope I did.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I think most of us have these really kind of twisty ways that we get to where we're supposed to be. And that's the cool thing about, talking with all of our guests is it's, rarely the case where it's like, I was going to do this and I did it. I was going to do this and then I found about this and then this, and so we just celebrate the fact that we've gotten to where we've gotten, right?
Exactly.
So you got on kind of my radar because I was looking through the Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy for, because it's a great resource, by the way. If you don't know about it, check it out. But I stumbled upon this massive compendium called Music Theory Examples in Video Game Music. And by yours truly, I don't know if you actually put everything together in it, or not, but it's this huge list of video game songs or pieces organized by kind of theory topics, from like fundamentals things to like intervals to chords and form and things like that. And then what I really love is that there are links to the composers and actually a lot of them like the sheet music, which is amazing, because that is sometimes a hurdle with this kind of medium where, okay, this is a cool piece, but now I have to transcribe it for my class. And not that we can't, it's just a time thing, right? And so it's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about kind of this resource, though I've already kind of told people about it a little bit, but how that resource works and kind of how you compiled all of it.
That's a great question. I have had some help for sure. I used another ludomusicologist's research on form. So a lot of the form research you see, credit to Alan Elkins. I believe in Florida right now. I'm not sure what college. I'm just not thinking. I'm going to be shouting out a lot of people. So I guess I was charged to teach Theory 3 at Mid-American Nazarene as an adjunct professor while still finishing up my dissertation. And Theory 3 was something I hadn't done before, and I was trying to think of different ways to do it. I really like teaching, so I wanted to make a game out of it, essentially. I mean, there's already been research on this. Megan Naxer has a really great chapter in not Hollywood Harmony, sorry, in Hidden Harmonies, music in the Japanese role-playing game. And she talks about, easy mode, medium mode, and hard mode, and syllabi, and different ways to set it up to kind of gamify the course. And I wanted to kind of do this, but also make it where we're making a game at the same time. So I was trying to make a resource for them to listen to games, them get familiar with the composers, with the music. And I thought I should probably share this. It would be a good idea. And I asked the JMTP if they would be open to something like that. And they said, yes, please. So we wanted me to edit a bit to fit the model that they've had with other ones. So I try to, the intervals are forward at the very beginning. I had everything listed by title and it was all mixed up. So I had to reorganize everything, which took a bit, but that wasn't too bad. And TJ Losnicola was also a big help in this, also credited as a co-author of this, doing a lot of form work as well. Most of the harmonic work was me by ear or by the lead sheets, usually kind of checking over each other. But the VGM lead sheets, the guys over there are really wonderful. Javrak and just everyone really came together and made a really wonderful resource. If you don't know, vgmleadsheets.com, and it's just a really great source. I'm going off topic now. I apologize. I just attempted to model this for myself, and I tried adding in some other theory parts. That's something that I'm working on. Another thing I'm working on is to bring in not the music theory that we typically have, I guess you could say. So really following examples of people like John Sapaimanot and Philip Ewell and people like that, and trying to expand past that. And there's research that's been done, like such on like Japanese modes and video games. I think it's Liam Heinz Tanwa, and the use of raga in games as well. I know Thomas He has been working on that as well. So there's a lot of work to do and a lot of things to add to it. It's a living document, so I don't ever want it to die unless some copyright comes down on me. But it's at this point, it's just a free and open resource that I'm trying to make available and for everyone to use in the classroom. I did it in 2020. That's about when I was finishing the degree. So just to kind of give you that timeline there. So, whew.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, or I think now we're charged with like looking for examples from other cultures, things like that, and how we can weave those in, to our context. And you mentioned, the use of ragas or these different modes that are non-Western are in some of these video games, which is a really great kind of way of accessing those things that may be outside of our typical Western canon, right?
Yes, for sure. I would agree with that. And and they're trained, I would say but video game composers, whether they're in the States or in Japan, they all usually come up, especially in the Nintendo and Super NES days, through university. And all the Japanese universities, they teach your American music for the most part and music theory. So you get a lot of classical musicisms in there, but you also get some Japanese traditional sounds in there as well. And the big thing is popular music. That's what's really accessed in here, more than you can even see. And there's a lot of research that credits it to to the American and European canon of rock music, but Japan also has a really big rock music canon as well. So I got off topic. I don't know if you asked a question. I'm gonna stop.
Oh, that's good. That's great. The off topic is great, and I don't think you're actually off topic at all.
Okay.
I totally agree. I think this is all very much on topic. Let me just start with that.
Okay.
You're super interested in this. And I'll say, for those of you that are maybe listening to this in the car or in your office or something, you may not be looking at the resource. There is so much stuff on here, and the ability to click on it and have a transcription is just so invaluable, as Paul said. And even something as basic as intervals, if you want to take an interval, I mean, the amount of examples you put together for even just the smallest intervals is super impressive. And then you get all the way down here in the form section. I mean, wow, all of this stuff. I love it. I absolutely love it. Sentence, you got your hybrids here, antecedent plus continuation. Wow, has Bill Kaplan seen this? I love this.
So it's funny you say the Bill Kaplan. That's the whole presentation on that from Alan Elkins. It's Kaplanian form in games, and it's very much making the point that it's not going to be exact Kaplanian. It's definitely not, Beethoven, Haydn, or Mozart. But some of this might be taken from that type things, and just how to loop, which is very important in games as well. The concept of looping, so leaving that sentence incomplete, leaving those fragments open, so it can go back around to the beginning and become this whole cohesive thing. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, that was exactly my question. I had immediately tried to find the form section when I got onto this, because to me, form is so different when you play a game, in that, like, you could end up going back to something or you end up going somewhere else. And, sometimes it makes it harder to find, let's say, like a complete example of a larger form. But somehow you managed to do that. Maybe you can, like, offer some words of wisdom as to how you did that, or what was the trick for these. I'm not familiar with these particular ones you have on here, but maybe you can tell us, like, what is it about that gives you the time to actually play a small form or actually hear the complete, AABB or something like that.
It's interesting. Sometimes it's laid out for you pretty well, because a lot of these composers are basing it off a song form. There's a new research, I think Greg Rossetti and Richard Anatone, I think, that's talking about song form, and a lot of using verse chorus as more of the standard in here. And whether you like that or not, that's something. I prefer the letters styles. There's a lot of ABAA, ABCD, the straight up through composed. Sometimes you just have theme and variations breakdown. One of my favorite video games pieces is the Passacaglia from Suikoden, and it's just this big organ theme and variations that's 4 minutes long, and it's just amazing. And you find out it's diegetic when you get to the top of the castle and everything. So it's just it's really awesome. But the forms, I mean, you're hearing these pieces loop over and over again. If you figure out where that loop point is, you're eventually you start to figure out that form. And I don't know, I was in my PhD when doing this in theory, so of course I was kind of honing in on these things as I was doing it. So it's not all me, though. A lot of the form, as I said, does come from Alan Elkins, the small form, the larger form from TJ Loznakola. And so I really can't claim all the form on here. Harmony and intervals are really my big ground, because, as I said, this was a Theory 3 resource I was trying to work with and build at the time. So I don't want to take the credit for that, because there are co-authors on here.
Yeah, I'm thinking, so I played a lot of Super Mario Brothers as a kid. Love that music.
Yes.
But yeah, now I mostly use our Wii Ring Fit thing and work out to the video game. That's pretty much the same. But even that one has this special music, when the monsters are coming and all of that kind of stuff. But I have graded a lot of papers to the music of Zelda, because that's what my husband's been playing lately. And the music, I don't know, I'll be sitting there and I'll be like, oh, you're walking into a village. I don't even have to be looking at the screen, because it's all so specific. But the new Zelda game, I think it's really interesting because there's all these things that you have to do for musicians in the game. You have
Yes.
to like build them a cart or build them a like an arena to play in or all of these things, and the musicians are so high maintenance. So I am laughing every time because if the cart isn't like covering them completely, they're like, I can't ride in that. And of course, I'm a horn player, and the main one who complains all the time is the horn player. So I find all of it very amusing. Um, but I think, as you know, I'm a like the way into the video game world. So I know that there's a lot to offer there, but we probably have listeners who maybe have never played a video game or who, haven't played many of them, who are teaching music theory and thinking, I know a lot of my students love this music because they tell me that. So I'm wondering, like, it is a really rich resource. Is there stuff in there you were surprised to find? Is there kind of musical elements that you were like, wow, I didn't expect to find X, and here it is in this music?
That's a good question. No, I mean, as I said, most of my education was done through video games. So it's one of those things where I was taking theory and I was like, that's from Xenogears, that's from Zelda, and I would hear these theory things, and I remember doing jazz theory, and one of my favorite soundtracks, Breath of Fire 3, and I was just like, all of this stuff is in here, and I was just recognizing it right away. It was like triggering episodic nostalgia right there. It was wonderful. So I wasn't completely surprised. I think cataloging it is where it became like, oh wow, this is or secondary dominance. I mean, that's a thing, in this style of music and popular music as well, that does, make an appearance a lot. But seeing a lot of the something that I haven't added yet, and I've had suggested to me a lot, is neo-Riemannian operations, which there are a ton throughout this music. Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the more famous examples of this. Has these really wonderful chains that are used, and I look forward to writing. I think that was the most surprising, was seeing some composers kind of draw from film. I mean, it's naturally happening that you kind of going to this film soundtrack style, but even in some of the older soundtracks, you would see this aesthetic being captured. Yeah, I don't think I was. I don't think I was surprised by it, but I think the quantity of it more than anything. And just how much different musics are in there. There's arrangements. There's, the fresh compositions that sound pretty similar to some compositions that you might have heard, or things that are straight up sampled, which is also a beautiful art on its own. And listening to things like Streets of Rage and Sonic the Hedgehog, you get some actual sampling that goes on. So yeah, it's the answer, I guess, short answer would be no. But thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to think that there would be these progressions that you could use neo-Riemannian theory for, right? If there's these connections to film music or like minimalism, that like there's that type of like, third way progressions, these chains. I think that's an interesting thing to think about too. Yeah, absolutely.
And Jim brought up something really interesting as well. You knew when a town theme was happening. There's a semiotic attachment. It's also a really easy way to kind of show these semiotic and film-esque attachments, because a lot of them are based off of film, which based off of silent film tropes that are still bleeding through today. So you get a lot of what Tim Summers calls texturing. So where you have it's like theme work, but it's embedded and it's part of the game world. It's diegetic in the game world.
Yeah, the other night he was playing, I was grading, I was not looking at the screen, and I have never played one single minute of Zelda, and I was like, you better save, there's a blood moon coming.
Yes,
because you can just
exactly
tell. Like the music is very clear. Yeah. It doesn't, yeah.
Exactly.
So, and that one's like time-based, not even environment-based. That can come right in the middle of a town or a cave or Sky Island or wherever you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, Jen, I love that. I love this like video game knowledge is just dropping.
Yeah, John would laugh if he heard you say that I have video game knowledge, but there you go.
So how should, would the way that you approached incorporating video game music, would you recommend that to other theory faculty as well, who might be teaching like a theory 3 class? Because I mean, theory 3 is like where you get into all those juicy chords, right? I mean, it's a great class. I love teaching theory 3, right? And so how do you recommend, like, is it something where you go like, oh man, I need to find all these examples, or is it okay just to be like bringing in one, or can you have the students bring things in? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. Once again, I'll try to answer this in a few different ways, kind of working reverse, I guess you could say. So I try to balance out everything in the textbook. So in the last College of Southern Maryland, we use tone of harmony, good old tone of harmony. And so I made sure to balance each example with at least 2 other examples, one video game example and one popular music example. Most of these students that I taught were either trying to transfer or trying to enter the professional field of usually recording of some sort. So I tried to spread it out and make it as practical as possible for them. So I guess games was part of the selection process. Everybody was interested in games, though, from the beginning. So I felt it was also important to make sure they know about, from theory 1, to make sure they know about the frame, the white racial frame in this field, and why they're learning what they're learning for transfer. It's not a fair thing, but it's all over the place. And one of the reasons why Japanese composers, came up in universities, they had this frame already built in. And there's a lot of argument of how that builds up. I'm not a Japanese scholar on that sort of history, but getting into that, it's there. And that frame is side by side with their own frame. And that's how it is in a lot of places. And I thought it was really important for my students to get a look into some of those critical thinking parts as well. So looking at research by scholars such as Angela Y. Davis, Leroy Moore. I gave them Kira Gaunt as well, talking about play, just in general, play and music. So giving them things they might not get till maybe a little bit later, or maybe not even at all, just to get them thinking about this stuff. Because a lot of what these composers are using is, you have the classical part, which is that frame. You have rock and roll, which is Black American music, and then you have jazz as well, which is also Black American music. So I feel like the students should know what they're dealing with, and to know about the line between appreciation and appropriation while we're doing it. So it's something you're getting throughout all 4 theory classes is readings. You get some on ludomusicology. I think that's important as well. I gave them, there's the video of the Alan Elkins form. So I'll send a link to you. Benjamin said he was interested in that. So, but I give them that as one of the things, and they respond. I got the idea from Brad Osborne, QCQ. So it's a quote, comment, question, just something from each of these articles. And then we discuss it a little bit. It was a 7-week theory course, so you have 3 hours of theory, which is a lot. So breaking the ice with these discussions was really helpful, and also got people thinking about, why are we learning this? Why are we having to learn about these specific concepts if we're going to transfer into a proper music school? As I did put up the air quote signs there. I know this is a podcast, so.
No, I love that you're having your students read articles. I have a really interesting class right now because I have students who I'm teaching just Theory 1 and RO1, and my students either have almost no staff notation background, theory background at all, or they had AP theory and have studied it forever, and they already are asking me questions about German augmented sixth chords. So I'm really in this interesting spot where I'm trying to keep half of them not bored and half of them not lost at any given time. And I like the idea of having something that like engages them about the topic even if they're things, a lot of things they don't understand yet. I think there are, plenty of articles that do that really well.
Yes, and
So yeah.
plenty of mediums. I mean, no doctors for one. SMTV, a lot of these different ones. One that's video game music specific is Kudo Musicology by Dana Plank. If you're not familiar with that, it's really great introduction into the field about kind of breaking down articles via Twitch streaming. So there's a lot of really great public musicology things that help out with that, and I really appreciate y'all for being one of those. It's a really great resource, and I've assigned podcast for some of these students and asked for a QCQ for that. So watch out, future students. No, I'm kidding, half kidding, a little bit kidding, a little bit kidding.
Well, I think it's so interesting to think about, like, you're preparing these students to be in the profession or perhaps transfer out. So as you're working in a community college, these students are going to be either going into like a professional, like maybe a commercial music career, or going to a kind of a standard four-year music school, right? And so obviously, they need to know the fundamentals and those types of things. But I love the fact that, like, you're thinking of it's not just the fundamentals, it's the mental side of theory. It's the thinking about music, like building in that type of interest and experience, which is going to not just make them successful in theory, but just as students, right? Because they're engaging with theory in more of a critical way. So when they go to music history, or when they go do their capstone, or when they get their master's and they have to write a paper, like, they've already been thinking about music. They've been in a critical way. They've been, reading articles or thinking about these things. And I think that's such a rich thing to have to get students being successful in the next level. So I love that. I really love that.
Thank you. Just a fair warning to JMTP, I'll likely be sending my reading list at some point to them. That's another resource. So just a fair warning in the future to the people with that publisher. That's I really like pitting the readings in, and again, that's not my idea. I can't claim these ideas. This is work that both like TJ Laws Nicola and Allison Lewis has really just instilled in me as well. So trying to get the students to think about what they're doing instead of just, having them play and go. But it's hard to balance that though too, because for transfer, there's so much required for transfer. I mean, so much required in y'all's first 4, theory classes, or 3, or however many you do, so it's a lot required to be able to try to break out and do something like that. I found a great balance, but if you try to do it, good luck. It's just finding that complete balance, and it's difficult.
Okay, so piggybacking on that, I try to tell my students that music theory is not chord labeling. It's a way of understanding. Okay, so there you go. You can hot take that.
I love it. I love that.
That's Ben Graff's hot take of the day. But then again, I always come back to, here we are with harmony in the center, and what am I doing? What did I do today? I did some chord labeling, okay? And that is part of music theory for sure. But when we look at video game music, how do we, in your expert opinion, how do we get beyond chord labeling? What is it that we can use in video game music that takes us and brings in all those other parameters that are just as, if not more, intriguing, striking, and expressive as just harmony?
I'm so glad you asked, because this resource at its current state is really directed towards harmony and form, like harmony informs form most of the time in this way. So it's very harmonic in its way. So I'm glad you asked that question. And there are many ways that I tried engaging with it, I guess you could say. So one is melodic writing. I mean, one of the great things about the VG lead sheets is you see the melody exposed. I mean, of course, there's the harmony there, but you get an interpretation of the melody, and you can really take a look at this line and see how it's weaved, and see some different examples of different types of weaving against, let's say something from, you can compare it to something, you could not do that. It doesn't really matter, however way you want to do that. It's if something samples something, how close is the sample? And using TikTok as there's a lot of videos that show samples and their video game counterparts or video game pieces that were used as samples in popular music. So kind of seeing how music theory helps inform those processes as well. Timbre and texture are a big one. So in ludomusicology, timbre is very important. I mean, chiptunes is a big part of the movement that grows out of game music for the most part. So George Reed is a really great person on that. So is Rainbow Trash or Dominic Pelletier. And both of them have some really wonderful research on play and chiptunes and music. And it's a really great way of examining timbre and recognizing things, because one of the great things about game music is that it has a history. So it's this growth history as well, because the sound chips start out very small. So you can only have 4 channels, a limitation. Something I give myself as a composer limitation sometimes, two square waves, a triangle wave, and a noise channel for percussion. And there's a really great plugin for Finale or Sibelius called Papu, P-A-P-U, that emulates the Game Boy sound. And you can get all that lined up in Finale if you wanted to. And that's the way I do a lot of this stuff. So I get my students to do that here and there and get familiar with those wave sounds. And then we graduate to the NES area where we have 8 tracks now. And we have some more waves, some more manipulation. Oh, suddenly we're in the Super Nintendo period. Now we have 16 tracks and maybe more, but 16, I kind of try to cap them off a little bit. And then you have full MIDI capability. So how would you actually orchestrate this? We need to talk orchestration now. This is because we didn't have an orchestration class as well at the college. So that had to be put into the Theory 4 part of things. So really forming these ensembles. Would this sound good acoustically? Does it sound good as MIDI? How can you arrange for real life? If this soundtrack became a huge deal, how would you arrange this for a real life orchestra to make it actually sound like good, I guess you could say? So there's a lot of practice with that. Improv's a big deal. In ear training, one of the ways I try to break the ice of sight singing, easing them into sight singing, was having them play first. So sight reading in a jam session style. So having them come like it was a jam session, and we read stuff from the VG lead sheet, stuff they knew. I asked them what their favorite game was, so I found a theme from each. We played the Pokemon Red theme. We played KK Bosses. Somebody brought that up from Animal Crossing, and a Zelda piece as well. And it was sight reading, but at the same time, it wasn't for them. They were somewhat familiar. So just kind of easing them into that, and then showing them ways they can improv with that, showing them some of that popular music theory, whether it's from rock or jazz, whatever band you go there. So it's there's so many. I want to answer this question for like an hour, but I've tried doing a lot of different things. I think model composition is probably one of my favorites, because the biggest thing about being a video game composer is you have to be a chameleon, just like you have to be in a film composer. So you need to know genres, you need to know styles, you need to know exactly how to get that sound, what chord produces that sound in your head, what you want, some sort of turn here, you want a modulation here, how is that going to work out? Yeah, I think I answered your question again, so I'll leave off on that one.
It was a great answer. Great.
You bring up like style, and I think that's something really helpful for students, and I think that's where your composition background comes in too, is you're used to listening to something or having to write something and thinking about what makes it sound like jazz, or what it makes it sound like a certain type of rock song or something like that. And again, you're asking students to engage more critically with the music that they're listening to. Like, why does Beyonce sound like that? Why does whoever sound like that, right? And then when you're doing those model compositions, you're giving them opportunities to try those things out, right? That's just really cool.
It isn't all roses all the time as well. So I do want to like pit that. Like it's people are receptive to this, but I'm also a bit older than my students. So I grew up in a very different era. So a lot of the games that I bring up sometimes, they're often like, I don't know about that. Or popular music as well, for that matter, because I did grow up in a different era. I try to stay current, but it's there's some pitfalls there. And another thing is there's also problematics in this music and also finding those. There's, monstrous composers in every field. There's also stereotyping that happens in music, something that, this is born out of a lot of music for the stage and silent film, especially. As a graduate student, I had the pleasure of doing a lot of digitizing of silent film scores for the Silent Film Sound and Music Archive. Thank you, Kendra Preston Leonard and Colin Roust, for that opportunity. And that was enlightening to see things used that are still used today that shouldn't really be used today. The mass amounts of appropriation of signaling certain cultures with a mode, or signaling certain things with a certain type of scale or timbre that you're going for, and then seeing the name of it in the silent film score as some really offensive cue in some ways. You see, but you still see these things today, and you still see it in video games pop up as well. And so also having students, I guess, see that and be aware of that. And that's another one of those appropriation versus appreciation deals. How far is that line? How thick is it? How thin is it? Are they appreciating the music by doing this? Are they appreciating the culture by doing this? And that usually brings up some interesting conversations, more than anything. So having them read and get some background knowledge on that is really helpful for that as well.
So those are some important considerations for sure, and you never want to lose sight of that, no matter
Exactly.
what you're teaching. I think that's something that I've definitely done better with in the last 3 to 4 years. It's just like always being mindful of context and the way things are presented. And as you said, yeah, appropriation versus appreciation. I like that kind of short way of summarizing. That's a good way of summarizing it. That's really good.
It's a good way. You don't want to minimalize it at the same time. So it usually spins out into something really big after that,
Hmm.
because it is something really big. It's something we're dealing with all of the time. I mean, exoticism is a thing in a lot of the music they study within the book. I mean, so they get to read a little Ralph Locke in those last few semesters of theories, just the introduction, no, not the entire book. So,
But I mean, I could imagine, you could connect, the exoticism that you see in like Stravinsky and like Rimsky-Korsakov, like primitivism, and then connect that to perhaps like some type of video game, music that is, playing a major pentatonic scale because it's set in China or something like that, right? I mean, the connections are there, right, really easily.
yes, they're all over the place. I mean, and racism exists everywhere. So it's something that I just want my students to be aware of and try not to fall into those pitfalls
Mhm.
additionally. Because just watching some composers go through the process and have careers, it seems like it's somewhat easy to fall into those pit traps. And that's sad to say.
Well, I have a slightly unrelated question, which is maybe, Brent, you can help me out. Maybe this is more for a plea for help than a question.
Go for it.
But what I like to do, and I don't know if you've ever done this with your students, and I don't know if maybe people listening have done something similar. Maybe this will be beneficial. I like to have a students write music to a game trailer. So, writing music to an entire game would be just insane. I mean, who would do that to their students? Okay, not even crazy Dr. Ben Graff. Okay, but maybe a 1 to 2 minute trailer. You could say, hey, let's write a theme for this particular trailer. And what I like to do is play the trailer with no music whatsoever. And I say, do not go and find this on YouTube. And then when they've done the composition, they have certain parameters given what class it is, of course. It might just be a passing tone or something. But, more advanced, you have more advanced parameters, of course. And then after they've done theirs, then they can go back and say, aha, this was the actual game trailer. This is what the actual game trailer sounded like. And I'll be honest with you, some of mine have come back and I said, I actually like yours better than the Nintendo. So my question is, have you ever done this? And number two, how do you find a game that is somewhat obscure that they don't already know the theme, but not so obscure that it's just like, what even is this? This is so obscure that nobody would ever even play the game anyways.
I love this
that
question.
middle ground.
Yeah, I love this question. No, this is a good one. Richard Hall at Texas State gave me that same assignment as a composer, graduate composer, and I really enjoyed that assignment. That really got me in, down that rabbit hole eventually in film and everything. So that is a wonderful assignment. I'm glad to hear that you're giving it. Now, what you said about the other thing is actually what I do. So making a hypothetical game soundtrack is the thing that I have them do. So let me explain. I'm not that cruel. Trust me. I have what's called a buffet system. So they have several different routes they can go. If they are basic, if they want to go by the book, they can do the workbook assignments. Just a straight up workbook, show that they can do that, execute, excellent, you're gone type thing. And I love those students. Those students are fabulous because they're usually really good at that stuff too. But you also have a composition routes, a model composition route. So Theory 3, I have a video game soundtrack, and it starts off, I give them a title screen from an old PS1 game that nobody knows called Beyond the Beyond, which is just a generic title, really great game, but it's nice. It's this old timey looking scroll with Beyond the Beyond and pixels and everything. I'm just like, this is your title.
Beyond the Beyond.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. So their first thing is to come up with the title cue. They've been hired by Theoretical Studios, and they have to come up with this title theme. And second week, it's a 7-week course again. So every week they have to bang something out, which these people are planning on doing video game composition. They need to learn how to do this quickly and actually produce it in a DAW and things. So Theory 1, they learn how to use a DAW and all that. So because we don't have a technology class as well. So I had to kind of roll that in. So they're having to exercise that a little bit as well. The next theme is your main character theme, your protagonist theme. And I kind of give them some things to think about and the things they need to use, of course. So secondary dominance was the topic of that week. So of course, some secondary dominance to instill some heroics, or however way you want to do it, there will be the way to have it. So it's being playful. And I think that's the most important part. We play games, we play music. Like and I love food, so buffet style really worked well for me. And there's plenty of other things they can do. There's a paper writing route if they wanted to synthesize a lot of the readings they did throughout the term, which is a talent onto itself. They do get a way to evaluate their theory chops as they go through that, though. So it's a thing. That's my Theory 3 thing. Like, so Theory 4, they did art songs. So they had a concept. They did an art song. They worked with voice. That was my big thing for them there. So the composers had that route, but there's always different routes as we go. You thought somebody talked about having your students find the examples. I have what's called the scavenger hunt route, where they have to go and find these concepts in several examples, bring them and then present on them. Talk about, do these examples work? Does this work in this context? And typically, they're pretty good at that. I like to play around with the form of the class a lot, and how I give that, and and I want them to play too while they're doing it.
Definitely. Great answer. I love it. Beyond, especially beyond the beyond.
Yeah, that is a great answer. And now I'm captivated. Do they have these different paths available to them at the same time in the same semester? How are
Yes.
you like not asleep from never resting because you're grading all the time?
So that's a great question. I had to go through a lot of changes as a teacher. I have a lot of good mentors when it comes to teaching. TJ Laws Nicola, I'll keep dropping the name, but that's one of the people who've given me the most guidance when teaching. And then, several of my theory professors and modeling after professors, things like that. But especially looking at universal design was a big eye opener for me, and trying to think about some of the different concepts that go into that. It's a lot of work front loaded. Oh my goodness, it's so much work up front, coming up with all these different things, which another thing I'm going to try to send a JMTP is my list of assignments that I have to share, because I mean, we're all in the same boat. We all need the same knowledge. But I just want to share this stuff. So if you're all interested, I can send you all these as well. But they have it in their syllabus. They have the different routes, and they're not contained to that route. If they decide a couple weeks in they hate the workbook route, they can switch midway through. I've had some that get partway through the composition route and just kind of burn out. That it's so much composing. There's like, I'm going to finish with 2 workbook assignments and that's it, type thing. And that's fine. It's a choice for them, but it also gives me a lot of it gives them a chance to exercise their talents, because they're getting to do things that they generally want to do. So it's quite easy to give feedback on that. And I've gone through the process of ungrading as well, it's mainly just feedback driven anyway, project and feedback driven. So grade it's there because I have to. The college makes me, and I tell them that, the college makes me put that grade there, but I want to make sure you understand this concept. I want to make sure you understand why we're doing this, and that you can put it into a practical manner. I have a lecture recital path for my performers, and I have had a few take that on. That's been a lot of fun to see analysis and then performing and kind of talking about all the different things, because they had to find a piece that really showed everything from that semester. Or 7-week term in that case. So I just feel the different paths are just a different way of evaluating and letting them take advantage of their talents, or letting them challenge themselves. I had one student do all the paths. I don't know why he did it. I told him he didn't have to do it like 3 times, and he did all of them. And I graded everything. I gave him feedback on everything. It was a lot for me, but I was also like really happy and excited at the same time that this really great popular like metal musician, like that was his main thing, was just churning out all this critical work, all of this compositions and different styles, and he was an absolute joy to work with. So all the students are. I mean, it's really just trying to center the students and make it an experience where they're going to try to get the most out of it that they can. So making it as practical as possible.
Yeah, that's
question.
Cool.
Sorry,
that is
great question.
that's I mean, we came to talk about like video game music, but like this conversation is like become meta, right? Because it's not about
beyond the beyond.
Res beyond the beyond. Because like what you're getting at is like turning the classroom into this like open space game, right? Where you have these different objectives, right? And you could do the main objective, right? Or the one that's standard, but you could also do these other ones, right? And they're not it's not side quests in the fact that there's only one important thing and these other ones are kind of doing other things, but there's actually these 4 main quests that all get you to the castle, but they're using different skills or different muscles. And so yeah, you can, if you're the big hulking dude, you can go that journey where you have to beat up a bunch of guys. But if you're like the smart person, you can do the puzzles that will get you to the castle or something like that. I'm imagining a game that doesn't exist, but
Yes.
but
this is what Megan Naxer, this isn't original at all.
Yeah.
So this is what Megan Naxer puts out there, is just gamifying it, and but in a way that's trying to make it impactful as possible while gamifying. I mean, that's a really hard way to do it, making a serious game out of it. And I don't like the term always, but that's essentially what you're doing, is trying to make something that should hopefully have an impact, I hope. By the end of it. that's all you can hope for as a theory teacher.
Right. Yeah. No, and I mean, I think that's really what we're wanting our students to have, is this experience where what they're learning impacts their real life. And
yes,
there are so many of our students who probably go through theory or oral skills and they don't have that experience.
And some of them don't know too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sorry for interrupting, but some of them don't even know. A lot of my students, they have no idea what they want to do. They just know they like music. And so this is also a way to help them find, well, what do you, you're going to have to teach. So I'm going to put you up in front of the class here and there, but that's just the musician reality. But what else do you want to do? And how can I get you to that space? It's a hard job, and it's a lot for the teacher to do. And I say that from experience, which is why I want to share the resources as well, and why I love that theorists are so willing to share these resources and their work. As I said, nothing of mine is original. I'm going to say that up front. It's a composer thing. We always say that.
Well, this has been just such a treat. I mean, this hour has just kind of flown by. We've loved having you on and catching you before you cross the pond and into England. And before though we let you go, we always like to ask our guests some just kind of rapid fire, hot take questions and answers about anything related to music theory. So Ben and Jen, do you have a question?
I have one.
Okay.
So best use of video game music for oral skills 1.
Ooh, really great question. Early soundtracks, Game Boy, Nintendo. You see a lot of people going to very basic. So I have a lot of Pokemon Red and Blue and other Pokemon ones. You have a lot of town themes are usually really tonal and within that theory and a theory 1 and 2 box for the most part. The best game example though, oh my goodness. I think is it the Pokemon Center theme from Red and Blue? I think it's the same Pokemon Center theme for each one. So that's one of my favorites to use, if I remember correctly, and I apologize if that's not it. It could be Pallet Town. I apologize.
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Ben, you got one?
I was going to ask, is there an example of the Locrian mode? But I'm going to hold off.
So you asked a good question, because I don't think I came up with one. I think I looked and looked and looked and looked, and there's shades of it, of course, like here and there, but it's usually a Phrygian type thing. Like you usually get that whole perfect fifth instead of the diminished fifth. Yep. Or you have a mixed mode, some type of hybrid mode where it starts out Phrygian and ends up, I don't know, Lydian or something, or major just period. But
still flat 2 is present, or
and again, like the modal things, the modal items on that resource is really like shades. They happen, and I'm a very firm believer in the key of the moment. So they happen for a moment, and then it's suddenly, well, no, now we're in a different thing. We're actually in a key, a tonality. We're in a modality, a tonality, something else.
Well, since I'm not going to ask that, I'll say.
Wait, you're trying to get 2 questions in here, Ben? That's fine.
No, I said whatever. I was going to ask Locrian, but I'm not. I wanted to ask about post-tonal.
Mm,
or maybe even non-triadic, because a lot of them on here are really triadic,
yes.
and mainly, like you said a second ago, tonal or modal. And is there a great example that you could use for post-tonal or something non-triadic, or what does your ear tell you about that?
There's a good amount, especially with, I mean, the last 20 years for the video game industry has seen a lot of film kind of interjection in there. So you get some very film-esque, neo-Romanian transformations or use of maybe sets in a way to irritate you in a horror film or in a horror context. So um Evil Within was one of the examples that I use for just a lot of timbre and showing these kind of screaming violins and things like that. But you also get Claire de Lune by Debussy when you go find a safe area. So there's just these weird little dichotomies that you have as well. But I think Final Fantasy Tactics is from the people I've talked to, and it's something I'd love to look at. I think there's somebody already doing it though. Is the Neo-Romanian operations all throughout that? Um, I looked at it in Chrono Trigger, and I can kind of force it, but it is really more of like a fusion jazz like feel. Like the style is more within the popular music context. So I could try to force Neo-Romanian on it, but why do that? But there's a ton with like tall chords, with extra extended torsion chords. I love using Breath of Fire 3 or some of the jazzier examples from Animal Crossing. But Breath of Fire 3, it's just you have all of them, 11s, 13s, 9s, whatever you want with the melody that emphasizes those notes. So trying to see how the melody works with these chords and how you can maybe voice lead it. So a fun example was trying to throw these lead sheets at somebody. And it's like, all right, do this in 4-part voice leading and see how that turns out. And it's kind of like a car wreck, but it's fun to watch. So yeah, I feel like I answered your question. I do want to put some more Neo-Romanian analyses. Yoko Shimomura has some really great 20th century techniques in Final Fantasy 15, Kingdom Hearts soundtracks, really pushing the dramatic styles, especially, but full on sets in 12 tone. Not so much unless you get like the Mickey Mousing like type of 12 tone, which is the actual Disney like has some of that etched into it, but it's part of that like style of walking and having these rows kind of laid out because, well, the composer for that was trained by Schoenberg, so big surprise.
All right, so my question is, what is the one or two video game composers that we need to be knowing about, or kind of, we all know Koji Kondo, all right, but who are the composers that if we're looking for examples or really interesting music, to check out their writing and the games that they're working on?
Great question. This gets in a little bit into canon forming. We've really gotten into this in ludomusicology quite a bit, which is the kind of canon formation, people leaning towards certain composers. So you mentioned Koji Kondo. Nobuo Uematsu is another one for Final Fantasy, but those weren't the big ones for me. They were big, yeah, sure. They were big. Don't get me wrong. They had an impact on me. 4 women had the biggest impact on me, though. The first one being Michiru Yamane, Castlevania. So I love pipe organ, and all these composers are pipe organ specialists. So she did a lot of the Super Nintendo and PlayStation's Castlevanias. She's an organist herself, and she's trained, in that style. As a big love for romantic music, and she's just a really wonderful composer and still puts out music. Miki Higashin, another organist for Suikoden, did a lot of earlier soundtracks though too, such as Gradius. I'm trying to hopefully write something on her soon because I just feel she's my favorite of all time. She needs more. She needs something out there about her on the theory time. Like it's about time. She's so freaking good. And she's the one who wrote the Passacaglia that I talked about earlier in Theme and Variations form. Yoko Shimomura, another one. She does a lot of the Kingdom Hearts and recently Final Fantasy 15. And then one of the old school ones, Yoko Kanno, who did Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Nobunaga's Ambition, but would be more known for anime soundtracks such as Cowboy Bebop and things like that, really jazz, straight ahead types of soundtracks. But she was very early in the industry in the 85, 86 time. Which set up for a lot of these people. And there's a bunch of living people too, of course. I mean, they're all living. Nobody's dead. What am I saying? I'm so used to, separating the living from dead composers in theory class that I have a hard time with the decomposers and the composers all the time. So it's a little tricky sometimes. But Lena Raine is one of like really great ones that's around. Helen Lynch is just absolutely fabulous. Just really thoughtful and expressive music. I'm trying to think of my names. I'm just forgetting everybody. So Roger Rupert. So yeah, I could just keep naming them off. But that's where I'm going to stop. You asked for two, and I feel like I answered everyone's question in long form. So there goes your quick fires.
No problem. No problem. That's great. I think that's super helpful for us finding a way into this music, and that's wonderful. And so as we wrap up, maybe let our listeners know a little bit about how they could find you if you want to be found online, and what you might have cooking in the near future.
So yeah, that's great. You can find me at drbaferguson.com. That's my home website. My stage name is Dr. B.A. Ferguson, so I do classical and flamenco guitar for the most part. I'll have an album coming out of a lot of those composers I just mentioned, of arrangements of their music in the flamenco style. So it's I play guitar. I as a composer, I should have an album of vocal and guitar pieces coming out with TJ Los Nicola as well. As a game developer, I have a few games coming out. So Bardcore will be coming out next year, and that's a music history-esque game that will have you playing as composers not completely within the canon against composers within the canon. And George Reed and Matthew Ferrandino are arranging all of these composers' music, several cues. We have something like 100 pieces now, and all in this chiptune style. So really an exercise in timbre and music history. And then the big game I'm working on is called Conductus. That's spelled Conductus. You play as a duck with a powdered wig, learning music theory, different theoretical concepts, whether they be from the Euro-American sphere, from the Indian sphere, from the East Asian sphere, and getting a lot of help from fellow ludomusicologists. I have an entire team of people that practice ludomusicology that's helping out with this, whether it's musical cues, writing, editing, but that will be coming out in a few years.
You just made it to the end of another episode of Note Doctors, the music theory and pedagogy podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review the podcast, and you can always reach us at notedoctorspodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or show ideas. Thanks for listening.